almost wrapping up our summit. We are delighted to do so in the company of Thembi Wolf. Until recently, Thembi was with Vice Germany, and she currently co-chairs the Neue Deutsche Medienmacher innen, the largest network of journalists of color and journalists with immigration biographies in Germany. Thembi is here to present the organization's recently published and brand new manual for diversity. And she will explain to us how it can help newsrooms solve their lack of representation. Thembi, welcome to the News Impact Summit on Diversity, Equity and Inclusion. We're all looking forward to your talk.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you for having me. As you heard, I'm a journalist by day and an activist by night. We, the New German Media Makers, we stand up for good reporting and for diverse media personnel in front and behind of the cameras and microphones and the editorial desks and everywhere, the planning staff, the management floors, and the supervisory bodies. And today I'm very excited. I'm excited to be here, but not only that, I'm excited because later today I'm casting my ballot. You may know we have elections coming up in Germany this week, and Sunday marks the end of an era for us. Angela Merkel is resigning, and this is an incredibly exciting time. There's an uncertain future in front of us, a shift in paradigm. We have no idea whether our future will be green or conservative or liberal or social democratic. However, if you watch German television, you wouldn't assume that I care about all that. That people like me, people of color, people with an international history care. Because German talk shows discussing the election are almost all white. In fact, more men named Wolfgang are invited to them than people of color. And of course, that's not a problem that we only have in election times. I recently learned that this is not a problem that talk show hosts aren't aware of. They know. I learned that 2 years ago because 2 years ago, we, the New German Media Makers, we awarded German talk shows a prize, a negative prize called Goldene Kartoffel, golden potato, for subpar reporting on a diverse society and for the fact that migrants and people of color are almost never invited to their panels, and if they are, to either debate migration or racism. The golden potato also included an offer to talk about that issue. And boy, they wanted to talk. They were furious. They felt we had called them racists. They were well aware of the problem, they said, and frantically looking for people of color to include in their panels. They wanted to. They simply couldn't find any. Now you have to know about Germany. Today, 25% of Germans have an international history. 25% have a parent or grandparent that was born outside of Germany, which is the definition. And in the generation after me, I'm 30 years old. In the generation after me, it's 40%. 40% who have an international history. In some big German cities, we are already the majority of people under 30. Now, in German newsrooms, that same number is 5%. 5. The rest are white Germans. So 2 years ago, we were very interested in whose fault that is, especially if even the talk shows are trying to change, but they can't. So we conducted a study, or credit where credit is due. We asked the University of Cologne to do it for us. And they talked to editors-in-chief of the 122 German media with the highest, widest reach. And they found out something that didn't surprise us, and they found out something that did surprise us. Now, German media is a closed shop. That doesn't surprise anyone. The results show that only 6% of the editors-in-chief of German media have a migration background. And if they do, they are from countries like Denmark or France, actually. Groups that are affected by racism and discrimination are not represented at all. amongst editors-in-chief. Those not very diverse editors-in-chief also have no idea how diverse or homogeneous their editorial teams are. They apparently don't want to know because they don't ask. The migration background or similar diversity characteristics are not elicited in newsrooms or media companies, with one exception, which is an international outlet that has an office in Germany. But all of that was not surprising to us. But surprisingly, most editors-in-chief want to change that. They consider diversity in editorial offices to be positive and desirable. They know that they are lacking, although hardly anyone is prepared to do anything about it. So we saw there's a will to change things. They just don't know which way to go, how to make their staff and reporting more diverse, how to do justice to their democratic task to address all people in Germany and not to overlook any of their stories and voices. That's when we decided to write a guide, a manual aimed specifically at German media houses, because there wasn't any. I was asked very politely to not make this keynote a promotional piece for our guide, but it's free anyway, and it's only available in German at the time, so perhaps I'll be forgiven. In our manual, which contains 144 pages of texts, you will find a selection of what we as an organization have learned over the years. Arguments and facts for more diversity, why media need more diversity to survive, which is a really good point to make. Biases in dealing with diverse media personnel, tips and tools, checklists and best practices for reporting, essays and perspectives. So it's a wild mix. There's tips on how to find professional wording that's not discriminatory, low discrimination photo reporting, and guidance on how to help media companies on the road to diversity, how to get diversity and discrimination right, how to find and retain the best talent. Plus, there's numerous articles about from guest authors, journalists, academics, and other experts. Actually, you heard about the BBC 50/50 Equality Projects earlier. We explained that in the book as well. And on page 145, there's an empty to-do list with lots of space for anything that needs to change in the media company that you're working in. When that guide, 145 pages, was ready to print, we were a little scared because we were afraid that something that would happen that often happens when bosses deal with diversity. They order a stack of this diversity book for the diversity working group in their company, and then they check the item diversity off their list for the next quarter. And then they proceed to more important matters like getting their subscriptions up. So we came up with a trick. The price for the book is free, you remember, was 1 hour of time. 1 hour of time with the editor-in-chief. Without the editorial team, without the diversity working group, 1 hour of full responsibility for the diversity issue. No one to delegate it to, because we thought diversity must be a matter at the top level, a matter of the bosses. And what happened was something we didn't expect at all. We got emails from all the German media, big TV stations and startups, conservative and left-wing radio stations and social media, even ad agencies, and platforms for theater critique that we had never heard of. So between 50 and 60 German media bosses actually wanted to talk to us. They wanted to give us an hour of their time, and they all wanted to have diversity, but they didn't know the way there. Now, we are, as an organization, what we would call in German a Scheinriese. a seeming giant. Our issues resonate, but we're actually pretty small. Our association has 200 members and a network of about 1,200 supporters. Our board, however, has 7 members, all of whom are volunteers and have, including me and my co-chair, we have all full-time jobs in editorial offices and studios or work as freelance journalists. But we had promised the hour of time, so we blocked out our lunch breaks for the next few weeks and met all the media bosses. None of us are diversity trainers or management consultants, and that sometimes did cause irritation at first, because that's what they expected, those editors-in-chief that wanted to meet us. But in the end, it was our big advantage, because German media still see diversity as a decoration, a nice to have to demonstrate goodwill. So we went in and told them, no, inclusion is a question of good, comprehensive reporting, of professionality and democracy. It's a professional issue. Now, I know you work in media around the world, in the US and Canada and India or Kenya, where the diversity of population might be a part of the identity of your respective countries. It might even be written into the constitution. Germany has been a country of immigration for a long time, but that has not yet entered in the public conscience. So when an all-white panel is discussing the corona crisis at a time when it's mainly people who live in migrant hotspots who are getting sick, that happens and no one flinches. It's always been like this. It's white people discussing everybody's issues. That's why a paradigm shift in newsrooms, we feel, must come from the top. It must be a part of the company identity and ingrained in the culture throughout all of the media business. Our talks with the editors-in-chief in our lunch breaks went was to be expected, mixed. We met some bosses who spent weeks working on job advertisement for editorial jobs just to make sure that everybody feels welcome. And we met bosses who thought having a story about Ramadan would do. One of the big misconceptions was, especially in the big media with a wide reach, that we wanted to promote young talent. We were told that there was a promising Turkish lady among the new trainees and one that may or may not have roots in Poland, but we're not quite sure. So we said, well, we would have loved to hear that in 1999. Actually, now we are past trainees. It's about your head of feature section, your morning show anchor, and your senior staff. Because after 6 years of labor migration into Germany and 4 decades, 6 decades, of course, 6 decades of labor migration into Germany and 4 decades of refugee migration, we are beyond young talent. It's time for the executive chairs to be diverse. Also, we have worked with young people for 10 years and we've provided them with education and mentorship. And we know that they work hard. They do so many unpaid internships, even when they can't afford it, just to get their first paid jobs. And then they quit. They quit because the editorial culture is not right, because they experience racism in newsrooms, because they're stigmatized, or they simply don't feel their voices heard and appreciated in an all-white newsroom. So that kind of diversifying from bottom up is not really sustainable. So what did we learn? 5 things. First thing, it starts at the top, and it pays to start at the top. But without the groundwork of the past decades, newsrooms would not be ready for that. Second, it's easy to talk about diversity as a concept. Everybody loves it. Everybody loves to have that word on their website. But when it comes to sharing power, for example, through affirmative action, through quotas, media houses are really hesitant. The third thing we learned was we need to become more diverse ourselves. Our guide includes chapters by guest authors, I mentioned, on queer people in the media and the media industry, on the barriers that make it difficult for children of working class parents to enter the profession, and on the difficulties of people with disabilities in the media business. We need to think all of those issues together and then join forces, which is why we are currently working on an intersectional update for the guide. And then the last thing, Rome, or our media businesses, weren't built in a day. And they definitely cannot be diversified in a 1-hour conversation with the boss, free of charge, by volunteers. Change has to be constant. It has to be constantly monitored, evaluated, and professionalized. I, for one, hope that we can diversity Rome a bit, maybe in the next 4 years, in time for the next pre-election talk show panels. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, dear Thembi. We have some questions from our viewers, so I will ask them to you. We have here first one from Doreen. Tell me how easy it is to venture in such a reporting project like diversity in Germany. How do you overcome any obstacles if you have faced any?
Well, the main issue actually were the top levels. We always worked with newsrooms for the past 20 years. We worked with very dedicated editors who wanted to change up the culture in the newsrooms. But it was always a problem to get to the top levels. And I think what's kind of playing into our hands right now is that diversity is becoming an issue that people that people in charge feel like they need to tackle to make a good impression. It's a bit sad because it's like PR playing into our hands, but that was the hardest thing to overcome, to make the bosses give up a part of their time, give up money to tackle those issues and not just see it as decoration.
Thank you, Thembi. We have here another from Pauline Tillman. Your association, Neue Deutsche Medienmacher, innen, published recently the diversity guide for German newsrooms. What are your top 3 tips for getting much more diverse in the German sphere? Let's talk about radical ideas.
I think tip 1, 2, and 3 is introduce a quota. A quota for your leading staff, a quota for your new staff, and a quota for your protagonists. I mentioned recently the 50-50 project that you heard about today, and it's actually, it was a bit disheartening to learn that without numbers, things are not going to change. This is not going to work. So introduce the quotas, monitor them, make sure that you have a goal when they should be achieved, and then work on it. But I think it's not going to work without the hard numbers.
We have one more question from Claire. Do you find the men-women split was 50-50 in the German newsrooms?
No. A very clear no.
And Thembi, the people ask when it will be available, the guide in English. There are many questions that they are asking for this guide.
Yeah, I imagine. We are working on that. We don't have a fixed date yet, but you can drop me a line if you're interested in that, and I will send it to you as soon as we publish it in English. That's yeah. But we are actually, I think one of the points, maybe I should have included that on the learnings, but one of the learnings was collaboration. is super important. So if you in your countries have practical solutions to those issues, if you have like manuals, if you have toolkits that might help other countries as well, I think it's super important to share them. One of the BBC 50/50 project I've been mentioning for the third time now. That's one of the things I think in English speaking countries that's pretty much known. Most German newsrooms, they're really happy to learn about that, to learn that it's like an easy way to do things. They hadn't heard about it before. They are happy that it doesn't cost a thing to start. So I think it's really helpful to collaborate and like cooperate and share resources.
We have time for one more question, Thembi. This is from Sant Hauna today. Thembi, can you elaborate how to balance between your ambition and responsibility as a journalist in the newsroom?
Well, that's a question that really, I think, everybody answers differently. I usually split between my professional work and my activist work, and I also don't really call myself an activist during the day. I actually make a really hard split as far as that's possible. And I think it's really important, especially for young people, when they enter a newsroom that's all white and they're the only person of color, they feel like somebody has to write about those issues. Somebody has to write about racism and race. And they feel like it's their responsibility to do so. And I think it's really important to tell them, no, if you want to write about ornithology, about birds, if you want to write about the environment, just do that. You don't have to write about racism. No one of us is obliged to cover those issues. I think it's a really important thing to give people on the way.
Thank you very much, Thembi, for being here today and for closing the summit. It was an honor. For closing the summit with this guide on how to implement strategies within the newsrooms in order to achieve diversity, equity, and inclusion. Also, we are looking forward to have it in English as well.